James Carter was a seasoned employee, known for his ambition and sharp skills, but when Marissa Jones was promoted to manager, his pride took a hit. Marissa was everything James thought a leader shouldn't be: young, a woman, and black. In his mind, her appointment wasn't earned, it was a result of the company trying to be politically correct. From the moment Marissa stepped into her new role, James made his disdain clear. He ignored her instructions during meetings, rolled his eyes when she spoke, and muttered sarcastic remarks under his breath. Despite his subtle defiance, Marissa remained composed, choosing to address the work rather than the tension. One afternoon during a team meeting, Marissa outlined a new project plan and assigned James a critical role. Her decision to trust him was meant to bridge the gap, to show she valued his expertise despite their rocky start. Instead, James took it as an insult, assuming she was trying to assert control. "That's not how this should be handled," he said, interrupting her mid-sentence. The room fell silent. Marissa paused, her calm gaze meeting his. "If you have an alternative approach, James, feel free to share it. We're all here to collaborate." Her composed response only deepened his resentment. After the meeting, James stormed to his desk, venting his frustrations to his colleague Tom Walker. "She thinks she's better than me, Tom. This is what happens when they hand out promotions to meet quotas," James said bitterly. Tom shrugged, offering a smirk. "She's not worth your energy, man. Let her trip herself up." But James wasn't satisfied with passive resistance. Deep down, he felt his authority, his identity, was being threatened, and he was determined to push back. If you're interested in more stories of tension, conflict, and redemption, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Stay tuned for the next chapter of this gripping narrative and other powerful tales of growth and transformation. During a busy week at the office, tensions between James and Marissa continued to simmer. Marissa, ever professional, worked diligently to keep the team motivated and focused, while James grew increasingly bitter. His resentment festered, especially after seeing how quickly other colleagues began to respect Marissa's leadership. The breaking point came one evening when the office was nearly empty. James had stayed late to finish a report, only to discover that Marissa was still working as well. Their paths crossed in the break room, where Marissa casually greeted him. "I noticed you've been putting extra effort into the project," she said, her tone neutral. "I appreciate that." James bristled, taking her words as patronizing. "I don't need your approval," he snapped. Marissa raised an eyebrow, surprised by his hostility. "James, I'm trying to build a collaborative environment here. If there's something on your mind, feel free to share it." That was all it took to unleash James' pent-up frustrations. "What's on my mind? What's on my mind is that you don't deserve this position. You waltzed in here with your big ideas, thinking you can tell me what to do. I've been here longer than you, I've worked harder than you." Marissa stayed calm, though her expression grew serious. "James, this isn't about who's been here longer. It's about who can lead. I respect your experience, but respect has to go both ways." Her words only added fuel to the fire. "Don't lecture me about respect," James shouted. In a moment of blind rage, he shoved her. Marissa stumbled, her head hitting the corner of the desk as she fell to the floor. The sound of the impact snapped James out of his anger. He froze, staring in horror as Marissa lay unconscious. Panic set in as James rushed to her side. "Marissa! Wake up," he pleaded, his hands trembling. Realizing the severity of the situation, he grabbed his phone and dialed 911. The paramedics arrived quickly, and James watched as they carefully lifted Marissa onto a stretcher. He felt a crushing weight of guilt settle over him, knowing that his actions had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. As he stood alone in the office, replaying the moment over and over in his mind, James began to realize that his anger wasn't just about Marissa, it was about his own insecurities, his unwillingness to adapt, and the deep-seated biases he had never confronted. The hours after the incident felt like an eternity for James. He couldn't bring himself to leave the hospital waiting room, pacing back and forth as guilt consumed him. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind, each time feeling a deeper sense of regret. Linda Hayes, one of his colleagues, arrived at the hospital after hearing what had happened. Her expression was a mix of shock and disappointment as she approached James. "What were you thinking?" she asked sharply. "Do you even understand what you've done?" James looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "It was an accident," he muttered weakly, "but Linda wasn't having it." "An accident?" "You shoved her, James. And we both know why," she said, her voice low but firm. "This isn't just about losing your temper. It's about the way you've treated her from the moment she became your boss. You let your prejudice control you, and now Marissa is lying in a hospital bed." James had no response. He knew Linda was right. All the excuses he'd been telling himself about Marissa's qualifications, about her leadership, crumbled in the face of what he'd done. Hours later, a nurse informed James and Linda that Marissa was awake and stable. To James' surprise, Marissa had asked to speak with him. Nervously, he entered her room, his heart pounding. Marissa lay in the hospital bed, her head bandaged but her expression calm. She looked at James with a mixture of exhaustion and disappointment. "Sit down," she said softly. James obeyed, struggling to find the words to apologize. Before he could speak, Marissa began. "James, I've worked hard to get to where I am. Harder than you'll ever know. And I've dealt with people like you before, people who think they're entitled to judge me because of the color of my skin or the fact that I'm a woman." Her words cut deep, but James didn't interrupt. "I don't know what's going on in your life that made you this angry, but none of it justifies what you did," she continued. "You let your anger and your prejudice take over, and it nearly cost me my life." Tears welled up in James' eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I was wrong about everything. I let my insecurities and my own ignorance get the best of me. I don't know how to fix this, but I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." Marissa studied him for a long moment before responding. "Fixing this starts with you, James. It starts with taking responsibility, not just for what you did to me, but for the way you've been thinking and acting for years. Change isn't easy, but it's necessary." James nodded, her words hitting him like a wake-up call. For the first time, he saw Marissa not as an obstacle or a rival, but as a person, someone who had shown him more grace than he deserved. In the weeks following the incident, James faced the consequences of his actions. The company launched an internal investigation, and he was temporarily suspended from work. During this time, he began attending mandatory sensitivity training sessions as part of his disciplinary measures. At first, James approached the training with skepticism, but as he listened to the stories of others and learned about the systemic challenges faced by marginalized groups, something began to shift in him. He realized how deeply ingrained his biases were and how they had shaped his perception of Marissa from the start. Meanwhile, Marissa returned to work after her recovery, greeted by an outpouring of support from her colleagues. Despite the ordeal, she remained focused on leading the team, refusing to let the incident define her. Linda often checked in on her, impressed by her resilience. One afternoon, James mustered the courage to write Marissa a letter. In it, he apologized again. This time in more detail. He admitted how wrong he had been, not only in his actions but in the way he had judged her from the moment she became his boss. He acknowledged the harm he had caused and expressed his determination to change. When Marissa received the letter, she read it carefully. While she appreciated his words, she knew actions spoke louder than apologies. She decided to meet with him one last time. Sitting across from her, James looked nervous but genuine. "I've been doing a lot of reflecting," he said. "I can't undo what I did, but I want to learn, to grow. I don't want to be the person who hurt you, or anyone else, ever again." Marissa studied him for a moment before replying. "James, growth isn't a single moment. It's a process. If you're serious about changing, it's going to take time and effort. But I believe people can change if they're willing to put in the work." Her words stayed with James as he returned to work. He kept his head down, focusing on his tasks and rebuilding trust with his colleagues. Slowly, he began to earn back their respect, not through grand gestures but through consistent effort. Marissa, true to her leadership style, gave him the space to prove himself. Though their relationship remained professional, there was a new understanding between them, a recognition of the potential for growth and redemption. Over time, James Carter transformed into a different person. He became an advocate for inclusion and fairness in the workplace, often reflecting on his own mistakes as a lesson for others. He supported diversity initiatives, mentored new employees with an open mind, and worked hard to rebuild the relationships he had damaged. Though their paths remained professional, there was a newfound respect between James and Marissa. She had seen his efforts and the changes he had made, knowing they came from a genuine place of accountability. One day, as James finished a presentation for the team, Marissa approached him. "Good work," she said with a small smile. "Thanks," James replied, grateful for her acknowledgement. It was a simple exchange, but it spoke volumes about the journey they had both been on, one of resilience, redemption, and growth. This story is a powerful reminder that change is always possible if you're willing to face your mistakes and learn from them. If you want to hear more stories of transformation and redemption, make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Don't miss out on more inspiring tales that challenge and inspire.